For years, Rome returned to this place for the same reason. Inside the Colosseum, 50,000 people took their seats as gates, chains, and hidden mechanisms began to move beneath the arena. In just a few moments, the noise of the crowd would stop being anticipation and become pressure on the sand. Because here, combat was never just entertainment. It was power, put on display for all to see.
Today, we step inside the Colosseum of Rome. Stay with us.
Even before the sun fully takes over the city, the streets begin to change their rhythm. Doors open, vendors get into position, families gather, and thousands of footsteps start moving in the same direction. This is not just another morning. It is the kind of day when all of Rome seems to revolve around a single event. The amphitheater is still in the distance, but it is already shaping the pulse of the city. Those walking toward it are not simply going to watch games. They are stepping into a public ritual, one that blends curiosity, habit, politics, and anticipation. As the crowd moves closer, the scale of the building begins to take over the eye. The arches repeat with precision. The curve of the facade seems endless, and the mass of stone makes one thing clear. This was built to impress long before any spectacle began. The Colosseum is not just a place for combat. It is a visual statement of what Rome can build, organize, and display before its own people. You can feel that just by imagining the approach. The closer you get, the smaller the individual seems. And that effect is no accident. The architecture itself is already preparing the audience to submit to the rhythm of the empire. When the mass of people reaches the entrances, urgency gives way to control. Guards, attendants, and interior passageways turn thousands of individuals into an orderly flow. Each entrance leads to a specific route, and every route reinforces the same idea. The amphitheater works like a machine built for circulation. Nothing here depends on improvisation. The Colosseum was designed to receive massive crowds with speed and discipline, and that says a great deal about Rome. Even the path to sit down and look is governed by visible rules. The spectacle begins before the arena itself, in the way the city is guided into stone, shadow, and expectation. Once inside, the audience quickly realizes that not everyone will see the arena the same way. The seats closest to the action belong to the privileged sectors, while the upper levels receive the majority of the population. The order of the stands mirrors the order of Roman society itself. Those with status see up close. Those with less power climb higher. In that sense, the amphitheater is a miniature city, arranged in plain view of everyone. Have you ever noticed how some spaces make it clear who matters most just by measuring the distance between the body and the center of the action? Here, that logic is carved in stone. The Colosseum does not merely hold the people, it exposes the structure of Rome while entertaining that same people. With the seating nearly full, another side of the Colosseum becomes impossible to ignore. Its engineering. The velarium casts shade over part of the crowd. Workers adjust ropes high above. The sand is prepared at the center, and the mechanisms beneath the arena remain active far from most eyes. What looks simple from the stands depends on a highly sophisticated operation. The amphitheater is not merely a stage for violence. It is a technical system designed to sustain rhythm, relative comfort, surprise, and scale. That organization sends a message too. Rome is not just displaying men in combat. It is displaying its ability to control space, crowd, light, and time within a single event. Now the atmosphere begins to change. The noise of the crowd is still there, but it no longer spreads in the same way. It starts to gather, as if 50,000 people are beginning to stare at the same point all at once. The sand is ready, the entrances have been sealed, and the gates are still holding back whatever is about to appear. It is striking how waiting itself becomes part of the show. The Colosseum knows how to work with the pause, the extra seconds, the partial silence before impact. You can almost feel that chill that comes right before something big begins. And for the Romans, that suspense mattered just as much as the fight itself. The games begin in an organized, public, and solemn way. Trumpets, official movement, and the presence of authority figures turn the arena into a formal space before it becomes a violent one. That detail matters because the Romans did not separate entertainment from civic ritual the way we do today. The opening of the games already presents an idea of order, grandeur, and authority. Everything must look legitimate, framed, and recognizable. The crowd is not facing chaos. It is facing a state ceremony wrapped in the form of spectacle. And that combination is exactly what makes the Colosseum so extraordinary. In that space, the empire presents itself to the people while entertaining them at the same time. As the morning advances, the arena changes tone and begins to chase immediate impact. The Venetians place exotic animals at the center of attention, and the reaction in the stands is almost instant. It is not only the danger that matters, but the message behind it. When Rome brings wild beasts from distant lands and turns them into spectacle, it is showing reach, dominance, and wealth. The audience sees speed, strength, and risk. The empire is displaying control over worlds many in the crowd will never know, and that works powerfully before such a massive audience. The Colosseum begins to prove, in practice, that it was not built merely to hold people, but to magnify shock and awe. When the hunters enter, the arena stops relying on surprise alone and begins to rely on skill. These men are not improvised performers. They understand distance, reaction time, posture, and risk. Every movement must calculate the animal's weight, the reach of the weapon, and the direction of escape. The audience follows everything closely because they know the fight can turn in an instant. That is when the tension truly rises. Danger alone is not enough. That danger must feel manageable until the final second. And honestly, that kind of contest commands anyone's attention. The crowd reacts because it senses that the arena is always one mistake away from changing completely. After the first shocks, the audience is no longer simply watching. It falls into the rhythm of the amphitheater. Each section reacts, wagers, comments, takes sides, and responds to the turns of the arena as if it were part of the action itself. The Colosseum becomes a kind of collective body, enormous, organized by class, yet emotionally tied to the same center. This is where the event reveals its social power. You are no longer just seeing animals, hunters, or fighters. You are seeing 50,000 people learning to react together. And if this journey into ancient Rome is already pulling you in, stay with us until the end, because what comes next reveals the hardest and most human side of this spectacle. As the morning phase begins to end, the energy of the arena shifts without the need for any formal announcement. Workers enter, the sand is reset, and the atmosphere loses some of the open excitement of the hunts. The crowd feels this transition, even if not everyone thinks about it in the same way. The Colosseum is not leaving spectacle behind, it is changing the type of spectacle. And that matters because it reveals the flexibility of the amphitheater as a public instrument. The same space that had just displayed dominance over nature now prepares to reinforce discipline and authority over people. The violence remains, but its meaning becomes colder, more institutional, and more visibly tied to control. By midday, the arena stops favoring skill and visual impact and begins to emphasize punishment. The condemned enter under guard, exposed before a crowd watching something very different from an even contest. Here, Rome is not merely entertaining, it is publicly teaching who has the right to punish, who has the right to command, and who can be displayed as an example. This is one of the clearest faces of Roman power inside the amphitheater. The Colosseum functions as a visible extension of authority, and that point sends a more rational chill than an emotional one, because it reveals just how tightly spectacle and government were intertwined. The crowd sees the scene. The empire sees discipline at work. Beneath the arena, the Colosseum reveals its most hidden side, and perhaps its most tense. Above, the crowd shouts, reacts, and competes for attention. Below, men wait in narrow corridors surrounded by wood, ropes, iron, and shadow. Here, any sense of spontaneity vanishes completely. Everything becomes preparation, sequence, waiting, and mechanism. Equipment is adjusted, gates are released at the right moment, and fighters listen from a distance to the pressure of the crowd waiting above them. Have you ever thought about that contrast? Above, an entire city compressed into expectation. Below, only a few footsteps, shallow breathing, and the feeling that the next sound may be your call. The climax of the day begins in the dark. Then the gates open, and the arena receives what the crowd has been waiting for most. Fighters enter from different classes, with their own weapons, protection, and strategy. That matters because this duel is not a random brawl. It is a clash between recognizable styles for those watching. One advances with weight and defense. The other depends on distance, agility, and the ability to read a mistake. The entire Colosseum seems to tighten around this confrontation because every eye locks onto the same movement, and when the fight turns, it truly turns. One wrong step, one opening, one fall. In that instant, the amphitheater erupts. The center of the story is here, when the roar of the crowd almost decides the direction of the scene itself. After the fall, the focus is no longer only on the skill of the victor. It is on the decision that comes next. The dominant fighter waits. The defeated one tries to remain visible. The crowd raises its arms, reacts section by section, and pushes against the moment as if noise itself could move fate. It is a powerful scene because it reveals the full logic of the Colosseum. The fight provides physical tension, but the outcome belongs to the framing of power before the crowd. The entire arena watches not just who has won, but what will be done with that victory. And in that moment, the spectacle stops being only body against body. It becomes public judgment, almost like a live cinematic scene unfolding before all of Rome. Once the great shock has passed, the machine of the amphitheater resumes operation with almost impersonal speed. Workers enter, collect objects, smooth the sand, and erase part of the chaos so the space can appear controlled again. That helps us understand something essential. For the audience, the climax feels absolute. For the Roman structure, it is only one stage within a much larger system. The arena carries traces of what has happened, but the event moves on. The Colosseum does not live on one memorable moment alone. It lives on its ability to absorb that moment, reorganize it, and continue. There is something cold in that, and maybe that is why it is so fascinating. The place turns emotional explosion into operational routine without losing its aura of grandeur. After the central duel, new pairs enter, and the program keeps moving forward. That matters for historical reconstruction, because a day of games was not reduced to one single decisive confrontation. The amphitheater was built to sustain duration, repetition, and variety within the same visual logic. The crowd has already experienced the peak, but it remains attentive because the Roman habit of spectacle depends precisely on that continuity. Each new fight carries less surprise than the last, but it reinforces the idea that the arena is an institutionalized routine. And notice how powerful that is. What would strike us as extraordinary may have felt, for many of them, like a recurring part of public life. The Colosseum is not an exception. It is a system. With the tension now more spread out, it becomes easier to notice the details that make all the difference in combat. The weight of armor drains energy. Mobility creates openings, but leaves the body more exposed. The type of shield changes the rhythm. The choice of distance changes everything. Gladiators were not simply men pushed into violence. Many were trained within recognizable categories, and the audience knew how to read those differences. That is where fame, risk, and technique meet. The more a fighter stood out, the more he carried a reputation before the city. And reputation, in that environment, could mean a better chance of survival, greater expectation from the audience, or even heavier pressure. In the arena, even prestige had physical weight. By this point, the audience can no longer be treated as background. The crowd comments, takes sides, reacts in waves, and shapes the mood of the amphitheater with every shift and advantage. The Colosseum works because the mass is not passive. It amplifies, pressures, rewards, rejects, and helps turn every confrontation into a collective event. Do you notice how the arena seems to breathe with the stands? It almost does. The force of the place depends as much on stone as on human reaction compressed within it. All of Rome is there, divided by social position, yet united by the same impulse before the sand. and that impulse is as much a part of the spectacle as the weapons and the fighters. When the amphitheater is observed more carefully, it becomes clear that the games do not serve popular taste alone. They also reinforce image, presence, and authority. The privileged seats, the visibility of powerful figures, and the organization of the event itself make that unmistakable. Whoever finances, presides over, or associates with the spectacle turns violence into political capital before the population. The people receive emotion, grandeur, and distraction. Power receives recognition, visibility, and symbolic loyalty. That exchange helps explain why the games mattered so much in the Roman world. This was not simply about passing time or feeding brutality. It was about managing public perception on a monumental scale, and the Colosseum was perfect for that. While the crowd remains absorbed by what happened in the arena, the underground level quietly takes over its role again. Equipment is carried, corridors are reset, the wounded are led away, parts are replaced, and everything must keep working even after hours of use. The contrast is harsh and deeply revealing. Above, the audience still vibrates with the memory of the duels. Below, the spectacle becomes labor, weight, exhaustion, and urgency. This invisible layer is one of the most important parts of understanding the Colosseum as it truly was. Nothing there depended only on courage or violence. It depended on continuous logistics, on people working in the dark, and on a material discipline capable of sustaining the grandeur Rome loved to display on the surface. As time moves forward, the amphitheater enters a different phase. The energy is still there, but it is no longer the same as in the morning or during the great central duel. Physical fatigue starts to appear in the posture of the crowd, in the movement of workers, and even in the way the arena seems to absorb the light. The violence continues, but now it carries the weight of accumulation. The sand holds marks, gestures become slightly slower, and the spectator's gaze begins to mix habit, exhaustion, and persistence. That too is part of the historical truth of a day of games. Not everything was a peak. There was duration, heat, fatigue, and the strange normalization of something that from the outside feels unbearable. There comes a moment when the amphitheater begins to release the tension it has carried since dawn. Final signals, staff movement, and changes in the behavior of the audience make it clear that the day is moving toward its close. The spectacle does not end all at once. It slows down in front of everyone's eyes. That reinforces the ritual nature of the event. Just as there was preparation and opening, there is also a way of closing what was lived inside that space. The arena is still being watched, but with a different quality of attention. The crowd can already feel that it will soon stop being a compact mass and return to being a scattered city. The Colosseum begins to give Rome back to Rome. As the sections begin to empty, the collective image dissolves into thousands of individual paths. Families gather again, vendors pack away what is left, children follow the adults, guards control the flow, and the internal corridors release the mass back into the streets. It is a striking visual transition. The city that entered arranged by seats now leaves reorganized by the road home. The spectacle is over, but it remains alive in the conversations, the gestures, and the immediate memories of those who witnessed it. The Colosseum proves its efficiency once again. It absorbs an immense population, shapes that population for hours, and then releases it back into the urban fabric as if opening its hands. The noise spreads out, but it does not disappear. After the crowd, what impresses most is the space itself. With the amphitheater nearly empty, the architecture seems even larger, as if the absence of people returns all visual authority to the stone. What remains is churned sand, tools, longer shadows, and a few workers finishing what is left to do. The relative silence does not erase what happened, it highlights it. You look at the arena and can almost feel the echo of the entire day still trapped there. This is a powerful moment for the video because it offers breadth and weight at the same time. Without the mass, the Colosseum stops being only an event and becomes a monument again. And as a monument, it seems to hold everything that has just happened. In the end, what makes the Colosseum unforgettable is not only the violence of the games. It is its ability to concentrate architecture, hierarchy, politics, ritual, and collective emotion within a single space. There, Rome displayed more than combat. It displayed itself. The amphitheater turned the crowd into an audience, the audience into an instrument of pressure, and the arena into a public language of power.
This video was a historical reconstruction with AI, based on records from the period, created for educational and narrative purposes.
Centuries later, the stone is still standing because it represents far more than ruin. It represents the way an empire organized the gaze of its people and turned spectacle into a reflection of its own authority. And maybe that is why it still holds our attention so strongly. The Colosseum does not only show how Rome fought, it shows how Rome wanted to be seen.